This week is the third part in our trilogy based around the life and musical enterprises of Malcolm McLaren. We previously looked at Adam and the Ants and Bow Wow Wow as two of the 80s bands on which he left his mark. This week we look at McLaren himself as an artist and performer, how he stepped from the world of fashion and management into the world of writing and performing his own music, and the various influences that shaped his work. So if all that scratching is making you itch, then double dutch with your buffalo gal as we look at another 80s song of the day. Before Malcolm McLaren was Malcolm McLaren, he was Malcolm Edwards. However, Malcolm Edwards changed his name after he was arrested for shoplifting. McLaren was the name of Malcolm's biological father, Peter McLaren. The name Edwards came from his stepfather, Martin. McLaren had a turbulent childhood. His mother, Emily, who also went by Eve Edwards, did not actually raise Malcolm or his brother Stewart, but left them in the care of their maternal grandmother, Rose Isaacs. Rose Isaacs' maiden name was Corre, and that was another surname that Malcolm went by on occasions. In fact, Malcolm's own son, Joe, goes by the name Corre instead. Malcolm McLaren linked the worlds of fashion and music together in a way that set styles and trends for much of the 1980s. Already known for his influential role in punk as the manager of the Sex Pistols, he then went on and managed Adam and the Ants for a brief period, and Bow Wow Wow. But when he moved on, it was to reinvent himself as a solo artist and musical innovator. Between 1983 and 89, he released 3 albums: Duck Rock, Fans, and Waltz Darling, each album marking a distinct phase in his exploration of genre fusion and cultural trends. Duck Rock, released in 1983, was made in collaboration with producer and co-writer Trevor Horn, and a duo of hip-hop radio DJs from New York called the world's famous Supreme Team. They were a duo of radio disc jockeys who hosted a hip-hop R&B show and were among the first DJs to introduce the art of scratching to the world. The album mixed up influences from Africa, the Americas, and the Caribbean, including hip-hop and rap, and helped bring those genres to a wider audience. The notable singles, Buffalo Gals and Double Dutch, both became major chart hits in the UK and internationally, but it wasn't a smooth ride initially. Noted for debuting the sound of vinyl scratching in the pop charts, as well as interspersing cuts of radio DJs talking and rap music, the entire thing was just unheard of in the UK. When McLaren presented it to the record company, they were horrified. Their response was to say, "This isn't music," and they actually threatened to sue him. So McLaren took it to someone he knew at a radio station who played it immediately, and it was a huge hit. Very quickly, other radio stations were calling the record label asking why they hadn't been sent a copy of McLaren's new single. Duck Rock inspired a shift in thought, influencing culture, our future albums by producers such as Quincy Jones, Herbie Hancock, and even Paul Simon. Compare the follow-up single Double Dutch, which spotlighted the competitive skipping game, to stuff from Paul Simon's Graceland album a few years later. Now, back in the 70s, McLaren had a jukebox in one of his fashion shops filled with singles from the 50s and 60s. One notable track that was played regularly by the patrons was called Saturday Night at the Duck Pond by the Cougars, which was an instrumental 60s rock-style remake of Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake. The track may have influenced the next genre into which McLaren dipped his toes. 1984 saw the release of his second album, Fans, another shift in direction, attempting a fusion of opera and contemporary R&B. The album features adaptations of classic operatic works such as Puccini's Madame Butterfly and Bizet's Carmen, reimagined with 1980s electronic and dance production. The lead single, Madam Butterfly, reached number 13 on the UK charts and number 16 in Australia, while Carmen also charted, though less successfully. McLaren spent some time in the mid-80s focused on film and stage projects, but was back again for a third album in 1989. Waltz Darling marked another stylistic leap. It again broke new ground with its pioneering fusion of dance music, classical influences, and spoken verse, as well as its role in elevating voguing and ballroom culture to the mainstream. Recorded with the Bootzilla Orchestra, the album featured collaborations with notable figures such as Jeff Beck and Willie Ninja, and included contributions from a range of guest vocalists. This genre-melding approach was both ahead of its time and difficult to categorise, which contributed to its critical acclaim and cult status, even as it struggled for mainstream radio play. The single Deep in Vogue was especially influential. The first song to celebrate voguing, a highly stylized form of dance inspired by the poses of models in fashion magazines. The dance style formed a part of the underground dance and ball scene of the gay African American and Latino voguing houses in New York City.
Imagine yourself runway modeling in freeze frame at the ball. That's what they call Vogue.
Deep in Vogue topped the US dance charts and preceded Madonna's Vogue by 8 months. Now, a personal memory I have from this time was that The House of the Blue Danube, the opening track from Waltz Darling, was actually used in the trailer for the original 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. Although Waltz Darling was not a major commercial success at release, it has grown in stature over time, recognised as a lost classic, and it's a seminal work in the intersection of dance music and pop culture. While he was on this melding classical and pop kick, McLaren was approached to collaborate with Greek composer Yanni to create a modern arrangement of the Flower Duet from the opera Lakme. Their version, titled Aria on Air, was specifically produced for British Airways for their world's favourite airline advertising campaign. This adaptation blended classical opera with contemporary production, and again dipping into that signature style of genre fusion. McLaren recorded 2 more albums in the 90s. There was Round the Outside from 1990, which revisited influences from the duck rock era, and then 1994's Paris, recorded in the City of Lights, which had inspired him greatly in his life. French actress Catherine Deneuve recorded the vocals for the album. McLaren died on April 8, 2010 in Switzerland at the age of 64 after a battle with peritoneal mesothelioma. McLaren's funeral was as unconventional as his life. His coffin was emblazoned with the phrase, "Too fast to live, too young to die," which had actually been the name of his first fashion shop. And he was buried in Highgate Cemetery, London, to the sound of Sid Vicious's version of I Did It My Way. His gravestone is a striking black granite monument featuring his visage, a bronze death mask, and it bears the epitaph, "Better a spectacular failure than a benign success," reflecting his lifelong embrace of risk, controversy, and flamboyant creativity. But what of our song of the day? What track could I pick to exemplify such a wildly diverse career? I almost can't. It seems almost fitting that perhaps I should choose through some kind of ridiculous, outrageous stunt. So, here it is. The Malcolm McLaren Memorial Wheel of Indecision. Let's spin it and see what we get. Waltz Darling. There you go. So that's your 80s song of the day. I hope you enjoy it. And look, if it wasn't a spectacular failure, or maybe even if it was, I hope you join me next time for another 80s song of the day.